Yeah, I think that was, I went into college my first year in 1981, and we won a national championship, and I hit the shot to win it all. And from that point on, it was like, well, I overcome a lot of expectations. A lot of people didn't feel I could go to Division I school and do so well.
Michael Jordan's legacy isn't just written in championship banners or MVP trophies. It's carved into the memories of every player who dared to step in his way and lived to regret it. Jordan was different, not just talented, obsessive. He collected slights like other players collected stats. A hard foul in November, he'd remember it in June. A celebration after beating his Bulls, that was a declaration of war. A trash talk session that went too far, you just signed your own death warrant. This wasn't normal competitive fire. This was something else entirely. Jordan didn't just want to win games. He wanted to break spirits. He wanted opponents to question their career choices. He wanted them to wake up years later in a cold sweat, remembering what it felt like to be in his crosshairs. The stories are legendary. The 37-point quarter against the Nuggets because someone said he couldn't score. The playoff series where he averaged 40 because an opponent called him old. The games where he'd smile at you while destroying your dreams, one fadeaway at a time. But some battles were different. Some opponents didn't just annoy Jordan, they consumed him. They lived rent-free in his head, driving him to levels of ruthlessness that shocked even his teammates. These weren't just basketball games, they were personal vendettas played out on national television. Years later, most of these rivalries have cooled. Handshakes have been exchanged, respect has been acknowledged, but the scars remain. And so do the stories of what happens when you push Michael Jordan too far. These are the 6 players who made the fatal mistake of making it personal with the most vindictive competitor in NBA history. Before proceeding, please take a second and subscribe, and like this video. It will be very motivation for us. If there's one name that truly ignited something primal in Michael Jordan, it was Isiah Thomas. Not because of a single dirty play or a one-time beef, but because for nearly a decade, Isiah was the architect of Jordan's basketball torment. The animosity between them wasn't fabricated by media. It was real, and it grew louder with every elbow, every playoff exit, every post-game smirk. Back in the mid-'80s, Jordan was the new kid with the golden wingspan, soaring through the air, dazzling crowds, changing the sport's entire visual language. But Isiah? He wasn't dazzled, he wasn't impressed. To him, Jordan was just another headline in need of a bruising, and he had the crew to do it. Detroit wasn't just tough, they were deliberate. The Jordan rules weren't rumors, they were blueprints. Whenever Chicago and Detroit collided, Isiah's bad boys flipped the game into a street fight. No easy lanes, no highlight reels. They cut off Jordan's airspace like a coordinated strike force, double teams at half court, hard fouls on layups, even off-ball screens came with forearms. And Isiah, leading from the front, wasn't afraid to whisper, shove, or swing momentum with a smirk and a snatchback dribble. Their 1988 playoff series was the first real war. Jordan averaged 27 a game, but Detroit walked away with the 4-1 victory. No matter how hard he pushed, the Pistons had an answer. By '89, the hate was boiling. Jordan dropped 32.1 points per game in the conference finals that year, but it wasn't enough. Detroit bullied their way to another win, 4-2, and then came 1990. Jordan's Bulls took it to 7 games, but when it mattered most, Isiah broke their rhythm, broke their confidence, and broke their hearts. Jordan never forgot that. But what truly made this rivalry venomous wasn't just the physicality, it was the dismissiveness. The way Isiah refused to acknowledge Jordan's rise. The way he'd diminish his greatness in press conferences with words like individual talent instead of team leader. And perhaps the deepest cut, the 1991 Eastern Conference Finals. That year, the Bulls finally matured. They swept Detroit in 4 games. The scorecards weren't even close. It was dominance, a passing of the torch. But instead of shaking hands at the buzzer, Isiah walked off the court with 7.9 seconds left. No words, no eye contact, just a sulk into the shadows. Jordan never forgave it. Years later, when reporters brought it up, Jordan didn't sugarcoat it. I know it's the sportsmanlike thing to do, but I can't forget that walk-off. And when the 1992 Olympic Dream Team was being assembled, Jordan drew a line. Either Isiah was out, or he was. That wasn't gossip. That was policy. Isiah was the only elite point guard from that era left off that team. And the bitterness didn't fade with time. Decades later, when Isiah tried to publicly patch things up, Jordan's reaction was cold, even sarcastic. He can say what he wants, Jordan once said, but he knows why he wasn't on that team. This wasn't just a rivalry of points and wins, it was personal philosophy. Jordan stood for competitive fire, fueled by work and excellence. Isiah stood for toughness, powered by edge and survival. And the collision between those two mindsets, it wasn't going to end with hugs and handshakes. To this day, Jordan rarely mentions Isaiah without a trace of tension. And while he's praised Magic, Bird, and Barkley over the years, when Isaiah's name comes up, the air still tightens. He wasn't just an opponent, he was a reminder of the years Jordan had to claw his way through pain, politics, and pride before he became the undisputed king. And if there's one man Jordan will probably never forgive, it's Isaiah Thomas. If Isaiah Thomas was the brain of the bad boys, Bill Laimbeer was the fist. To Michael Jordan, Laimbeer wasn't just a tough matchup. He was a calculated menace, a 6'11" agitator with a jump shot and a scowl, built less like a basketball player and more like an enforcer from a different sport. He wasn't trying to win your respect. He was trying to erase your rhythm, fracture your focus, and leave a message every time you touched the ball. Laimbeer wasn't merely defending Jordan, he was trying to fracture everything Jordan represented: discipline, respect, order. By the way, if this is your kind of content, don't just watch, subscribe. You're in the right place. He delivered hits with purpose, never enough to get tossed, but always enough to hurt. On backdoor cuts, there was a forearm. On jump shots, a late slide under the legs. He wasn't defending, he was disrupting, and doing it by design. And the most infuriating part, he never acted like it mattered. No jawing, no celebrations. Just a walk back up court like nothing had happened, as if a shove to the chest or a rake to the forearm was part of the playbook, which, for him, it was. For MJ, who thrived on outworking, outthinking, and outlasting his opponents, Laimbeer was something different, something unspoken. A player who didn't seem to care about greatness, just interference. It wasn't about stopping the Bulls' star. It was about reducing him, turning the game into a grind so relentless that even air seemed contested. By 1989, the battles between Chicago and Detroit had gone from heated to hostile. Every playoff meeting carried new scars, and by the time they met in the 1990 Eastern Conference Finals, it wasn't just physical anymore, it was personal. In Game 3, Jordan drove baseline and soared, only to be yanked mid-air by Laimbeer, arms wrapped tight like a wrestler finishing a hold. No play on the ball, just a takedown. The whistle blew. The boos rained down, but Laimbeer never flinched. Jordan got up, glared, adjusted his jersey, and dropped 47. But the bruises stayed. The message was clear. You might beat Detroit on the scoreboard, but they'd make you feel it. Off the court, Laimbeer doubled down. In pressers, he painted Jordan as soft, whined too much, couldn't handle contact. And when the Bulls finally flipped the script in 1991, sweeping Detroit out of the playoffs, it was Laimbeer who led the infamous walk-off. No handshakes, no nods of respect, just a bitter exit down the tunnel. For Jordan, that sealed it. Years later, he wouldn't hold back. When asked if he respected Laimbeer, he said, "Not a damn bit." And Laimbeer, he wore it like a badge, said it meant he'd done his job. Still called the Bulls overrated, still poked the bear decades after retiring. Because to Laimbeer, the hate didn't sting. It validated him, and that's what made him such a singular figure in Jordan's story. He didn't just rough him up, he antagonized the very idea of who MJ was: a craftsman, a competitor, a perfectionist. Laimbeer didn't want a duel, he wanted chaos. He wanted to stain the canvas. In the end, Jordan didn't just beat Laimbeer with points. He beat him by refusing to descend into his game, by outlasting him, by becoming the standard, while Laimbeer became the footnote. But make no mistake, that footnote left bruises. Because while most rivals sharpened Jordan's skills, Bill Laimbeer sharpened his edge. Reggie Miller never looked like someone who should be able to bother Michael Jordan. He wasn't built like Gary Payton, he didn't hit like Laimbeer, he didn't explode like Dominique. But the game wasn't just about strength or speed, it was about timing, about nerve, about who could stand in the fire the longest without blinking. And Reggie? He brought gasoline. He was all sharp edges and sharper words, a wiry scorer with a jumper that punished hesitation and a mouth that never stopped moving. To Jordan, it was infuriating. Reggie didn't just compete, he provoked. He invited you into a mental war and dared you to blink first. Their first real clash came in 1993, a preseason game of all things, supposed to be harmless, routine. Jordan was easing in, Reggie was revving up. He hit a few shots early, turned to MJ and let the commentary fly. Most would have backed off. Reggie leaned in, and when Jordan caught fire in the second half, there was contact, words, then fists. The scuffle got both of them ejected, and the rivalry was born. Later that night, Jordan faced the press. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He just delivered one line with the cold precision of a guillotine. "Don't ever compare me to Reggie Miller." From that moment on, Bulls versus Pacers wasn't just a matchup. It was a countdown, a slow-building collision that would explode 5 years later. By 1998, the tension had calcified. The Pacers were no longer plucky underdogs. They were contenders, veteran-laden, battle-tested. And Reggie Miller, still gliding off screens and slicing through gaps, had become the face of Indiana's resistance. The Eastern Conference Finals brought them to the brink. Game 4, tied series, final seconds. Reggie slipped free, caught the inbound, twisted midair, and launched. The shot dropped through as time expired. Conseco Fieldhouse erupted. Miller sprinted backwards, arms out, adrenaline flooding his veins, and somewhere amid the chaos, he locked eyes with the man he'd been chasing for years. He didn't say a word, he didn't need to, but Jordan registered it. You could see it, a subtle clench of the jaw, a hard step toward the bench. It wasn't fear, it wasn't even anger, it was calculation. Reggie had earned the spotlight. Now, he'd have to survive in it. Game 7 came like winter, slow, cold, inevitable. The Pacers punched first, then Jordan responded. Not with flash, not with fire, but with control. Precision footwork, mid-range daggers, a pair of crucial rebounds. Every possession was a test, every minute a verdict. Chicago won by 5. After the game, Jordan didn't flex, didn't celebrate. He sat down and quietly admitted Indiana had pushed him as far as anyone. He didn't give Reggie a direct mention, but that was the respect, silent, earned, and impossible to ignore. Years later, when asked which player annoyed him the most, Jordan didn't hesitate. Reggie, he said, because he never shut up. But Miller didn't need to. He understood the rarest truth in basketball. Sometimes the greatest weapon isn't talent or tactics, it's audacity. The sheer belief that you belong on the same stage as the best, and the gall to act like it. Reggie Miller didn't beat Jordan, but he cracked the aura, just enough to leave a mark. And that's why his name still echoes in every Jordan retrospective. John Starks wasn't a superstar. He didn't have a shoe deal, didn't dominate all-star ballots, and didn't carry a franchise on his shoulders. What he did have was something far more dangerous, blind confidence, and a New York zip code. To Michael Jordan, that made him a problem. The Bulls and Knicks didn't just play basketball in the 90s, they clashed like tectonic plates. Every matchup was physical, emotional, personal, and right in the middle of the chaos. Gritting his teeth and throwing his body into the fire was John Starks. He was undrafted, undersized, undeterred, a 6'3" former grocery bagger who climbed his way from the fringes of the league to become the Knicks' emotional backbone. And when Chicago came to town, Starks transformed. He barked, he brawled, he took the Jordan matchup like a challenge from the gods and dared to respond with fire. Most players wilted under Jordan's glare. Starks leaned into it. He'd clap in MJ's face after hitting a 3. He'd chase him baseline, elbow first, and he never, ever let Jordan dictate the tone. If you shoved him, he'd shove back. If you dunked on him, he'd meet you at the rim next play. It wasn't about winning the war. It was about showing you weren't afraid of it. And then came May 25th, 1993. Game 2 of the Eastern Conference Finals, Knicks versus Bulls. Madison Square Garden pulsing with energy. Jordan already seething after a rough Game 1, and in the closing moments of the fourth quarter, Starks delivered one of the most iconic moments of his career, the dunk. It wasn't just a drive, it was a declaration. Starks took the ball on the right wing, blew past B.J. Armstrong, and launched himself into the air. Horace Grant was there. Jordan rotated over late, but it didn't matter. Starks rose, left-handed, and threw it down over both of them. MSG exploded. Starks pumped his fists like a man possessed, and the camera caught Jordan walking away, chewing his gum a little harder. The Knicks would win that game, and for a moment, it felt like Starks had cracked the code. But if there's one truth about Jordan, it's this: he never forgets. Chicago stormed back in the series. Jordan averaged 32 a game, dissected the Knicks defense like it was a film reel, and silenced the Garden with a Game 5 masterpiece. Starks? He kept swinging, kept jawing, but the gap became obvious. Jordan didn't just beat him, he absorbed the emotion and used it as fuel. Still, Starks had left a scar, not because he outplayed Jordan, but because he never backed down. For a player like MJ, who built his legacy on mental dominance, that was a thorn that refused to dislodge. Their battles continued through 1994. The Bulls were Jordan-less. The Knicks made the finals. But even without him on the court, Starks kept talking about him, kept invoking his name, kept trying to measure himself against the ghost. When Jordan returned in '95, he didn't address Starks directly. He didn't have to. He just showed up at the Garden and dropped 55. Years later, in The Last Dance, Jordan didn't spend much time on Starks. No deep grudges, no elaborate stories, just a smirk, a nod, as if to say, he was annoying, but he mattered. And that's what made the Starks rivalry so unique. It wasn't built on championships or stats, it was built on friction, on two men wired for conflict. One, a generational icon. The other, a street fighter with something to prove. John Starks was never MJ's equal, but he was a symbol of New York toughness, of playoff wars, of the rare player who didn't ask for Jordan's respect and didn't care if he got it. Gary Payton didn't sneak into Michael Jordan's head. He kicked the damn door open. Most defenders tried to stop Jordan with double teams, prayer, or desperation. Payton came armed with something else: volume, nonstop talking, chest-to-chest defense, and the kind of swagger that made even Jordan raise an eyebrow. The glove didn't just guard you, he gripped your soul, squeezed until you cracked, and laughed in your face while doing it. By the time the 1996 NBA Finals rolled around, Payton was already a Defensive Player of the Year and the heartbeat of a 64-win Seattle Supersonics team. Jordan, fresh off his first full season back from baseball, was out to reclaim his crown. The media painted it as a mismatch. MJ and the 72-win Bulls were too dominant, too polished. But Payton, he never saw himself as the underdog. In games 1 through 3, coach George Karl oddly kept Payton off Jordan. Seattle lost all 3. Then came Game 4. Payton finally got the assignment. From the opening tip, it was clear. Jordan wasn't comfortable. Payton bumped him off spots, denied the ball, talked trash in every direction. He made Jordan work. Chicago still won the series in 6, but the tone had changed. For once, someone had made MJ look human. Years later, in The Last Dance, Payton laughed when he recalled his finals defense, said he wore Jordan down. Jordan, watching the footage, couldn't help but crack up. "I had no problem with the glove." But the smirk told a different story. Maybe not fear, but definitely recognition. Because for all his noise, Gary Payton was never just talk. He made Jordan sweat, and very few men on earth could say that. Danny Ainge wasn't the biggest name Michael Jordan ever faced, but he might have been one of the most annoying. He didn't block shots, he didn't dunk on you, he didn't drop 40, but he got in your face, constantly. Ainge was that scrappy, undersized guard who played like the arena lights were just a formality, like he would have fought Jordan the same way in a church parking lot. They clashed early, 1986, first-round playoffs. Jordan dropped 63 points on Ainge's Celtics in Game 2, the most ever in a postseason game. But look past the box score, and there was something else going on. Ainge wasn't backing down. He bumped Jordan on cuts, yanked his jersey, threw his body into screens. Bird called it Danny being Danny. Jordan called it personal. Ainge came from baseball. He was drafted by the Toronto Blue Jays before ever stepping on an NBA court. So he brought a different kind of toughness, the chirpy, grinded-out, dirty knuckle brand. He wasn't going to outjump Jordan, but he'd claw, scratch, talk, shove. Anything to throw rhythm off. And for a player like MJ, who built dominance on timing and control, that was infuriating. Their battles didn't end in the 80s. In 1993, Ainge was with the Phoenix Suns, Jordan with the Bulls. Finals, high stakes. This time, Ainge had Charles Barkley on his side. But again, it was Ainge stirring the pot. Trash talk, hard fouls, cheap shots. He even smirked his way into a few altercations with Jordan during the series, and MJ wasn't smiling. The Bulls won in 6. Jordan averaged over 40 points, and yet, after the confetti fell, it was Ainge who still lingered in the stories. Not because he shut Jordan down, no one could, but because he bugged him, got under his skin, made him react. Years later, Ainge would go on to become a GM, a front office brain. But when Jordan talks about the guys who tested his patience, not with strength or size, but with constant, calculated irritation, Ainge always gets a mention. He was that guy you hated losing to, and hated winning against even more, because you knew he'd still be chirping in the locker room afterward. For Jordan, greatness was about control, mastery, precision, and Ainge. He was chaos with a headband. Not the scariest opponent Jordan ever faced, but definitely one of the most hated. If you thought Jordan's rivalries were brutal, just wait till you hear who Shaquille O'Neal struggled with. So if you want to see who the Diesel truly respected, and why even he had nights where dominance didn't come easy, tap the next video. It's a different kind of list, same intensity, same battles. Please do not forget to subscribe to this channel and comment your thoughts on these battles.